Right now, there are over 50 active armed conflicts happening on this planet. 50. And we are in 2026, a century after the war to end all wars happened. 7 decades after the United Nations was created specifically to stop this. So let me ask you a very simple question. Why does war never end? And not why does this particular war happen? I mean, why does the pattern never stop? Why does every generation get its war? Why have humans for thousands of years chosen to point weapons at each other rather than solving things differently? Welcome to your own channel Knowledge Feed. Today we are going to answer that properly, and not with humans are evil and not with politicians are corrupt. Those are lazy answers. The real answer is far more disturbing and far more specific. So let's dive into it. Let's start with the paradox. Since 1945, that is, since the world agreed never again, there have been over 232 armed conflicts recorded globally. Over 1 billion people are currently affected by active war zones. And globally, military spending in 2023 crossed $2.4 trillion. That is more than the entire GDP of India spent on weapons and armies in a single year. Now here's the question no one is really asking loudly. If war is so catastrophically destructive, if everyone knows it causes famine, displacement, trauma and poverty, why do leaders keep choosing it? The answer is because the question is wrong. The right question is who decides to go to the war and what do they personally lose? That is the thread we're going to pull today. Power, resources and territory. Here is a concept called zero-sum geography. Land does not duplicate, oil does not multiply, water does not copy-paste. When one nation controls a piece of territory or a natural resource, another nation does not. And that is a zero-sum game. Someone wins, someone loses. And throughout history, the winning strategy has almost always involved force. Think about Iraq in 2003. The official reason was weapon of mass destruction, which, as the world later discovered, did not even exist. But Iraq had the world's second largest oil reserves. Coincidence? The pattern repeats. South China Sea today, the Sahel in Africa, Eastern Europe, dress it in ideology, nationalism or democracy, but follow the oil, the water and the minerals. And then there is something called the security dilemma. This is fascinating. When a country A builds a bigger army just for defense, country B sees that as a threat and builds even bigger army, which makes country A feel threatened, which makes it build more. Now both countries keep spending, keep arming, and neither feels safer. In fact, both feel more threatened than before. This is not a metaphor. This is literally how the First World War happened. Everyone was armed to the teeth just in case, and one assassination in Sarajevo triggered the whole machine. Clausewitz, the Prussian military theorist, said, "War is merely the continuation of politics by other means." And he was right. War doesn't replace politics. It is politics, but with guns. Now this is the reason most analysts underestimate, because it is not about resources or strategy. It is about what is inside human brains. Tribalism. Evolution over millions of years wired the human brain to be extremely good at one thing, surviving in a small group. Your tribe fed you, protected you, and mattered. Outsiders were a potential threat. This in-group versus out-group thinking is not a choice. It's a cognitive default. And politicians know exactly how to activate it. You think about how quickly, after a border dispute or a terror attack, a government can turn an entire population against another ethnicity or nation. Weeks and sometimes days. Now think about dehumanization. Look at the historical record of every major genocide or ethnic conflict. Before the violence, there is always a period of language. The target group gets called vermin, cockroaches, rats, cancers. And this is not an accident. It is deliberate. Because human beings find it psychologically very difficult to kill other human beings. But if you convince them that the enemy is not quite human, that barrier drops. There is also honor and humiliation. This one gets ignored in geopolitics books. But nations go to war to avoid embarrassment as much as to gain territory. The Treaty of Versailles humiliated Germany so thoroughly in 1919 that it made Hitler possible. Humiliation does not end, it ferments. And finally, availability bias. One dramatic terror attack can shift an entire country's foreign policy towards war, even when the statistical risk is tiny. Humans are extremely bad at comparing the number of people who might die in this war against the number of people who might die if we don't go to war. We react to what is vivid and recent and not to what is statistically accurate. You cannot bomb tribalism out of a human brain, it has to be educated out. And that is a much slower and harder process than buying a missile. And now we get to the reason that connects everything. Follow the money. In 2023, Lockheed Martin, one American defense company, earned $67 billion in revenue. And not profit, revenue. 67 billion. And this is one company. And there are dozens we never know of. Here's the critical observation. Arms manufacturers do not benefit from peace. Their business model requires conflict, or at minimum the threat of conflict. When war begins somewhere in the world, defense sector stocks go up every single time. Now consider war debt. Almost no country can fund a war from its own treasury. Wars are borrowed and banks lend to both sides, sometimes literally. Debt from wars lasts for generations. Britain finished paying off its World War II debt only in 2006. And then there are reconstruction contracts. The countries or companies that help destroy infrastructure are often first in line to rebuild it, and at full market rate. Iraq, Libya, Ukraine today. The same geopolitical actors who back the destruction are backing the reconstruction. Different invoice, same beneficiary. And finally, sanctions and trade control. War or the threat of it gives superpowers the leverage to redesign global trade routes, exclude rivals from financial systems, and lock in economic dominance for decades. War for ordinary people is a catastrophe, but for a small group of people, it is a very, very profitable business model. And what makes this so difficult to break is that this is not a conspiracy, it is a system. A threat is perceived, real or manufactured, that justifies arms buildup. The buildup increases tensions, and conflict begins either directly or through proxy wars. Profits flow in, reconstruction begins, and then a new threat is narrated by politicians who need an enemy, by media that benefits from fear, by industries that need the next contract. And the cycle resets. Now, the cycle does not require anyone sitting in a room saying, let's start a war for profit. The incentives are already built into the structure. Defense lobbies fund politicians. Politicians need narratives for elections. Media needs conflicts for rating. And populations, frightened by tribalism, support the decision. And our soldiers, mostly from the poorest families, go and fight it out. Every player in the system is acting in what appears to be their own rational interest. No one individual needs to be evil. The system produces the outcome anyway. And this cycle doesn't break unless someone refuses to enter it. So is there any hope? Yes. Actually, yes, but it's complicated. There is something called the democratic peace theory, the empirical observation that stable, established democracies almost never go to war with each other. Not because democracies are morally superior, but because in a democracy, the people who vote for war are also the people who die in it, and that accountability changes the calculation. Nuclear deterrence has so far prevented direct great power conflicts since 1945. The logic of mutually assured destruction is horrifying, but it has held. And economic interdependence matters. When China and United States trade $700 billion in a year with each other, a full-scale war destroys both economies. Trade is a peace dividend. But none of this stops proxy wars. Great powers fight through smaller nations. No soldier from a superpower dies, but hundreds of thousands of people in Yemen, Syria, or Afghanistan do. Nuclear deterrence means nothing to non-state actors, extremist groups, or suicide attackers. You cannot threaten someone who wants to die. And the next generation of conflicts is already loading. Climate change is going to create water scarcity, crop failures, mass migration, all of which have historically been precursors to conflict. So here is the honest answer. War never ends because the costs fall on many, while the benefits flow to few. The soldier who loses a leg, the family that loses a home, the child who loses a parent, they pay the cost. The arms manufacturer, the politician who wins the election on a war platform, the banker who funds the debt, they collect the benefit. This is not pessimism, this is just how systems work when accountability is absent. And the only force that has ever changed a system like this, historically, actually, in the real world, is an informed population that refuses to be manipulated by tribalism, by manufactured threats, by nationalism sold as identity. That is why videos like this exist, not to depress you, but so that next time someone tries to sell you a war, you know exactly what they are selling and who is buying it. If this video made you think differently about something, share it with your friends because that is how this loop breaks. See you in the next one.